Well, it's 2025. As we think about the new year, we always think about setting new goals for ourselves to achieve in that year. One of my goals was to join a gym, and I just finally did that this last week. For some of us, the goal was to start a business. The goal was to finally get that dream off the ground. But there are things that stop us from starting that business. There are fears that stop us from doing that. There's a lack of education about how to actually do that. And I am starting this channel so that I can address some of those issues and help you get going. My name is Jane, and this is Mom's Biz Tips. For 30 years, I've helped people structure and manage their business so they can achieve their goals and their dreams. And now that I'm retired, I would like to share some of what I know with you so that you can do that as well. You know, I just recently learned something that to me was really interesting. I didn't know that both fear and excitement are processed in the same part of the brain. And so as a result, we often mistake one emotion for another. And I can tell you that probably one of my best examples of that was when I took my girls to Busch Gardens, and they talked me into riding the roller coaster that has no bottom on it. You sit in a seat and they put this harness over you and they buckle you in and your feet dangle. In fact, if you were wearing flip-flops, they made you turn in your flip-flops because they're going to come off. Now, as we're waiting in line for this, I have excitement in my heart as I'm thinking about doing this, but I also have a lot of fear. But my girls were super excited about it, especially excited about riding in the front row. So we waited a long, long time to ride in that front row. And when we finally got up there, you sit down, they buckle you in, they snap you in, they check to make sure that you are locked and loaded for this trip, and then you take off. And they fling you like a rag doll through space. And if I hadn't been locked down, I probably would have lifted that harness and jumped because I went into such an intense panic. In fact, I sweated for 3 days after that. And that was the last time I went to Busch Gardens. And to be honest, that really was the last time I ever rode a roller coaster. I'm going to officially be the person that will hold all the backpacks. I had a lot of excitement. I probably should have had a lot of fear, but it usually doesn't work that way. So for example, I have never been a very big social media person. I've been super busy with my career and raising my girls, and I really don't even do Facebook. So when my girls said, we really need to start a channel where you teach people our age some of the stuff you know so that we can get our businesses going, I had a lot of what I perceived as fear. And I have come to realize that it really wasn't fear. It really was excitement over learning something new and doing something completely and totally different than I'd ever done before. So the next time that you are experiencing what you think is fear, I want you to just ask yourself, is it possible that this is not actually fear, but excitement? Because it really could just be excitement. Another thing that often stops us, especially women, from doing something new and different from what we're used to doing is what's called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is when there is a little voice in the back of your head that keeps telling you that you're not good enough and you're not smart enough and you can never do this and you're not going to succeed. Now, I don't really know why, but this seems to particularly affect women. So my partner is a man, and I had a question from somebody about imposter syndrome, and just on a hunch, I said to him, do you know what imposter syndrome is? And he looked at me like I had two heads, and he said, no, I have no idea. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like maybe you're not good enough or talented enough to succeed at something that you want to do? And he said, no, I've never felt that way. Never. Now, that's so odd to me because it is so natural for me to always, always doubt myself. He was raised by parents who told him he could do anything, he could be anything. There were no limits on him whatsoever. And my parents were really good parents, but I don't think I was raised with that. I think I always knew that I wasn't pretty enough or thin enough or smart enough or good enough. I just wasn't enough. And they never said that. I just always felt it. So I wanted to address this because maybe imposter syndrome is the thing that is holding you back from starting your own business. And I would tell you that while it's something you will probably always struggle with, the answer for it is to stand really firm in what you know to be true. And what you know to be true is based not on what you think and feel, but on what other people tell you is true. So for example, when I used to do my consulting business, even years ago, I would charge a lot of money to go on site. I even charged travel time. And I would spend 3 to 4 hours with my client, and they would write me a big fat check. And then they would say, I cannot thank you enough for how much you have helped me. Now, that is empirical evidence that you stand in that truth with, and you know that what you're doing is helpful to other people. Let's say you make soap and you sell it at the morning market downtown, and you continue to get customers that come back to your booth raving about your product. That is your empirical evidence. You stand in the truth of knowing that you make an excellent product that other people appreciate and come back to buy again. You do not listen to that voice that goes on and on and on in your head. You stand in the truth of what people tell you. And of course, there's always people that are going to tell you what you want to hear. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about unsolicited, outside feedback. For some people, there is the fear of the unknown. There is so much to unpack and learn about starting your own business. It's nothing like being somebody's employee. So let's say you've been somebody's employee for a long time, and what you do for them is you create their websites, and you're really, really good at that. And you want to go out on your own and start doing this for other people. But there's a lot to know before you make that leap. That is the reason I've started this channel. I want to give you some of the tools that you're going to need if you are going to successfully pursue your dream of having your own business. You know, part of the reason for the fear of the unknown is that there is an enormous educational gap in our system for how to start your own business. Now, I want you to think back to when you were in grade school or even high school or maybe even college. Were you ever taught how to start your own business? I know my kids weren't. I know I certainly wasn't. You know, my kids here in Pinellas County had this wonderful opportunity to go to what they called Enterprise Village. They had something like this down in Miami called Wanna-Do Village. And it was a whole town that was recreated. I remember there was a drugstore, there was a bank, there was a car dealership, there was an apartment complex. And you were given a job to do, and you were given a salary check. And with that salary check, you had to secure your housing, you had to get an automobile, and you had to go to work. And you had to write these checks and balance your checkbook, and you had to buy your groceries with that. And it was a very interesting, hands-on way of teaching people how to be an employee. But you know, in that village, there was never an opportunity to explore the possibility of having your own business. And if you think about it, even if you take a business course in college, those courses are designed for you to help other entrepreneurs run their businesses. They aren't designed to teach you how to run a business. In fact, probably the only avenue for that kind of approach, at least here in this county, is the vocational education college, where men and women learn how to become plumbers or electrician or bricklayers or auto mechanics. And those are the people that it is generally assumed that there's a good chance they're going to go into business for themselves, if not initially, eventually. But again, no real training on all the other details that are needed if you are going to successfully run your business. So we have a huge education gap. I would love to hear from you. What have you experienced? Are you living in a place where they do teach you how to run your own business? Because that just isn't the case down here in Florida. Drop your comments below, and I'd love to read them. So you may be asking yourself, do I need a perfect plan to get started? The answer to that is no, you absolutely don't need a perfect plan to get started. In fact, if you had a perfect plan to get started, you will probably change that plan 20 times in the next month. So don't get too hung up about that. So what do you need to get started? You really don't even need a name for your business. What you need is a product or service that you can offer to other people. A good example of this might be the person who designs websites for their employer. And you have a cousin who comes to you and asks you if he could please pay you to do a website for him. And you agree to do that, and he gives you $700 for doing that website. That's awesome. Okay, you just started your business. And I have good news and bad news about that. The bad news is that you have to record that income on your tax return, because he is going to record that as a business expense, and the books of the world have to equal. If somebody is claiming this as an expense, somebody else has to claim that same thing as income. It needs to equal out. The good news is that you now get to claim your business expenses. Now, let me give you an example of that. In the past, when you were somebody else's employee, when you bought your computer, it was a personal expense, and that is not tax deductible. But now that you have your own business, that computer that you need to upgrade and buy a new one for, that is now a business expense, and you can take that as an expense to help offset the income that you just generated. In fact, there's a lot of business expenses that you can take. You can take cell phone bills to the extent that you're using it to answer your business calls. If you take a client to dinner, there's the cost of that meal. If you are traveling from client to client, there's those travel expenses. Maybe you're going to fly to a convention. All of that is tax deductible. So you have to claim your income, but you also get to claim your expenses. So I would say the first thing that you need to do if you are going to start a business is you need to keep very good track of both your income and your expenses. You don't need expensive software to do that. You can use Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. You can just do it on a spreadsheet, but you're going to need to access this information at the beginning of next year so that you can report it. Initially, probably the best way to go about doing this is as a side hustle to your regular job. You really need to give some thought as to what your end goal is as you think about starting your business. It's one of two things. It's either one, I love my job, I'm never going to leave my job, I just want the opportunity to explore other avenues on the side. Now, a good example of that is my younger daughter. She loves her job. She is in exactly the field that she got a lot of education to be in that field, but she doesn't get to do video editing, and she loves doing video editing. So she has a side hustle, which means she has her own business on the side. It does not have a name. It is not registered with any agency, but I report her income and expenses on a Schedule C on her 1040 tax return every year. And she's done this for a number of years, and it's kind of like a monetized hobby. And she really doesn't have any intention of ever doing this full time. So what she is doing is called a sole proprietorship. And I'm going to refer to that from time to time. A sole proprietorship is when you are self-employed for some degree of income, and you have expenses related to that degree of income, and it is reported on a Schedule C on your 1040 tax return. And that's a great way for people to explore the viability of their idea. A good example also would be somebody who, for a hobby, makes soap and has decided, as they're building up their inventory, that they need to try to sell that soap a little bit more broadly than just to friends and relatives. That's a hobby that has become monetized, and perhaps it may grow into something so big that it will eventually need more time or attention, or who knows, maybe even an employee. But for right now, it's small, it's manageable, and it's just a side hustle. But let's say that you have always dreamed of running your own business and doing what you do best for yourself, for your benefit, that you are the one that profits from your hard work. And you know that eventually you do not want to be somebody's employee. So that would be like my older daughter. She and I have both always known that one day she was going to have her own business. And in the end of, let me see, when was it? It was a couple years ago. She decided to register the name of her business with her Department of State and fill out the paperwork so that she would get her employer identification number. And then for the next year, she ran that business with one or two clients. She ran that business at the same time that she was working full time. Now, I cannot begin to tell you how exhausting that is. And really, the only reason she got approval from her primary care physician and her mental health counselor was because she had an absolute deadline exit date in mind when she did this. This is not something that you can do long range. None of us are designed to do 2 full-time jobs at one time. She did that for almost a year. And then when she felt like she had sufficient accounts, she then left her full-time employed position and is now working her business full-time. I really strongly recommend that if you can do that, the very, very best way to start your own business is to run it as a side hustle while you are in the employ of somebody else. First of all, it alleviates a lot of financial difficulty. I always feel very sad in my heart for people who have a good idea or a good product and the business doesn't take flight because there's just not enough money available so that they can even buy their groceries and pay for their gas. I'm not talking about large equipment investments. I'm just talking about living. This eliminates that. You can explore your business ideas while you are still earning your income and able to pay your bills and survive. I mean, if you came from a really wealthy family, you wouldn't have to worry about that. Maybe you're a trust fund baby, but chances are if you're a trust fund baby, you wouldn't even be watching this channel. If you start your own business, you're going to have to choose what kind of business you want that to be structurally. So let me explain this. You can become a C Corp. That's what Duke Energy and Norwegian Cruise Lines and AT&T are. Those are large corporations. There's very specific rules on their filing. They have to file an 1120 tax return. And it is really not for small entrepreneurs. It's not the best way to go unless you are a large corporation. When I incorporated in 1998, they did not have LLCs. And so I incorporated directly as an S corporation. Now, an S corporation doesn't pay its own tax. In 1120, they pay their own tax. So let's say they make $1 million, they have to pay whatever the tax is on $1 million. I don't even know what the corporate tax rate is, but the corporation pays the corporate tax. When you're an S corporation, the S corporation doesn't pay any tax. You get a K-1 and it flows through to your 1040 personal tax return. Now you still have to do an 1120S return, but the corporation, the S corporation, does not directly pay tax. It flows through to your personal tax return. Now LLCs are available, and when you have an LLC, that LLC can be taxed in a number of different ways. It can be taxed as a sole proprietor, which is that Schedule C that we talked about before, or it could be taxed as an S corporation if you make the election to be taxed as an S corporation. And we're going to talk more about this later. Or it could be taxed as a partnership. Maybe you're going into a partnership with somebody else, and then you each get your own K-1, and that gets reported on your personal income tax return. So which business structure is best for you? I guess it depends on what your end goal really is. If your end goal is to always just have this as a side hustle, then I think just being a sole proprietor is perfectly fine. But if your goal is to run your own business and it will be your sole source of income, I think you would be wise to look at registering with your state department and get a federal identification number and decide how you're going to be taxed. I know this feels just a little bit overwhelming, and we're going to try to break this down so that it's not so overwhelming for you. Just remember, you don't need to have a perfect start. You just need to have a plan where you put one foot in front of the other, and today you decide that you're going to take on a client and you're going to track that income and that expense, and you're going to see if this feels good for you, and if it does, then maybe you actually want to set up a business. In the meantime, you can just do this little side hustle without ever having any business name or identification number. So it's just one foot in front of the next. It doesn't need to be a perfect plan. You just need to get going, because I think there's a lot of anxiety that builds up if there's something you really want to do and you keep delaying it. Do you have a question for me? Please comment below and click the notification button if you want to be alerted to new videos. I did want to tell you that if you would like some personalized guidance, check out my website, momsbiztips.com. I do offer one-on-one consulting, and that way we can get to the bottom of your most pressing issues. I'd love to hear from you. Please stay tuned. Thanks.